So I'm Leon VanderPol, the founder of the Center for Transformational Coaching, and this is a masterclass where we're going to explore the topic of how to know if your clients or the people you're working with in any sense are kind of ready for deeper work, for the transformational coaching approach, or if you're not doing transformational coaching, just transformational work in general. So my intent for you today is to show you a model that I came across many years ago. This was very much back in my early days of entry into the coaching industry, probably 2006, 2007, somewhere in that time. And it made a big impact on me. It is a model from Janet Hagberg called The Six Stages of Personal Power. And I remember it helped because it helped gel a number of things for me in my own personal experience. Now, it comes from a book that she's written called Real Power, Personal Power in Organizations. So on the cover, it's got this sense of leadership slant to it. And indeed, many of the anecdotes throughout the book are leadership oriented. But when I read that book, I don't see just leadership. I see the human experience coming alive. There are many models out there, what we could call human developmental models, many in the marketplace. But there was something about the simplicity of this model and that I could see myself within it so readily. And I could see how it applied to my life. So over the years, what I was also on a kind of quest to understand, like when I first began coaching way back, I was trained like many people in a very transactional format. And indeed, transactional coaching, which is really results-driven coaching, is the foundation of all coaching. But there was always a part of me, and probably because I'd been on my own kind of journey of really coming to know who I was on a personal level, on a spiritual level for so long, that I'd always been interested in going deeper with people. And I didn't necessarily know what that looked like early on, and I didn't necessarily know what transformation was. It wasn't that somebody had come to me with a book and said, hey, look, this is what transformation as a human experience is like. And these are the dynamics, and these are the patterns. And if you're in the midst of this, you can kind of understand what this is, and you can normalize your own experience. I didn't ever come across a body of work like that. So I was also in my own process of kind of piecing together things that said to me, this is what transformation is as a human experience. And so when I read this model and I was so readily able to identify with it and to see myself within it, it became a part of then how I understood my own journey. And since then, I've taught this model in the classes I teach, the Deep Coaching Intensive at the center. We introduced this model, and I've noticed again I guess we've been teaching this work now for well over a decade. I've noticed that time after time, there is, again, in people who see it, a relational aspect. Like they can see themselves within it so readily. And again, it begins to normalize your process. It also begins to help you understand why you experience life the way you do. And perhaps for those of you who are saying, I sense that I'm myself on a bit of a journey here. A bit of a journey to know my deeper or higher nature, the journey to understand my potentials beyond perhaps what I've been taught about who I am, or what I've been taught is to be true about the nature of life and reality. Like, if you're on that journey, this model is going to really be able to open some things up for you personally. And then in terms of application, you'll be able to see other people that you're working with and even not working with within its patterns and within its dynamics. So what I'll do today is I'm going to talk for a little bit. I hope to make this interactive and engaging at some point, for sure, because I know that I'm going to present something and then there's going to be questions that come up, and I love that part of this. So make sure you track your questions. What I'll do is I'll divide it into two simple parts. The first, I'll just introduce the model and its stages. And then I'll open it up for clarification questions, and I'll come back and I'll speak to it in terms of relationship, in terms of how it applies to people that we're working with. And even as I share it with you, probably some of that's going to foreshadow the second part. You'll begin to see, okay, so I see the people that I'm working with in these patterns and dynamics already. Okay, so let me do a couple things. First, I'm going to put it up as a slide very briefly. But I'm also going to pop it into the chat so that I don't have to keep the slide up and you can refer to it as needed as we go along here. Okay, where's my chat? Let me see if I've got that here. Okay, let's see if you can all access this. I'll just pop this in the chat here. Okay, you should be able to all nicely either just refer to it or download it. That's fine. And I've got one other piece I want to show you too, because we're talking about stages of personal power. But therefore, it helps to define what power is. Let me just put this slide up. And I find this a very, again, I'm all about kind of simplicity and understanding the nature of the human journey. I'm all about simplicity. So this is, I think, a very simple and easeful way to understand personal power because there are many different images of it. So personal power is that from which you draw your sense of self, purpose, worth, value in the world. And when I say draw, I mean, think of it like drawing water from a well. Like you drop a bucket in, you're pulling water out of a well. Think of it in that terms, not the sketching. Like that from which you draw your sense of self, your sense of purpose, your sense of worth and value in the world. So that's how we're going to kind of hold the definition of personal power here. And this will make sense as we go through the model a little bit more. Okay. So I'll just temporarily put up this model here on the screen so we can all see it again. The 6 stages are first powerlessness, then power by association, then power by achievement, sometimes called power by symbol, power by reflection, and then power by wisdom. I think I got them all. Power by purpose, then power by wisdom. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so hopefully you've all got that, so I don't have to keep this slide up as we go forward here. Okay. So the first stage is yeah, powerlessness. It's like a stage of personal power. Powerlessness is effectively the sense that you do not have personal agency, personal power in the world. An easy way to think of it is a place of kind of victimhood. Now, in victimhood, a person is sensing that life is beyond their creative control. Life is beyond their control. In fact, life happens to you. You are the victim of circumstances. You're the victim of other people's behavior. You're the victim of karma, whatever it is. That life happens to you and you have very little personal power, personal agency to make change, to make your life move in meaningful ways. And many of you are likely to know this stage. In fact, I'd probably say that all of us at one point in our life have experienced that sense of just hopelessness, perhaps despair or depression, where we've just got no sense of personal power. Like life is just happening. Now, clearly, when we're youngins, when we're born into this world, that is a perfect example of us being wholly dependent on the world around us for that which we have. But we also learn quite quickly that a good bellow screech from the lungs is going to call forth things that we need to have happen for our well-being. And we learn that quite quickly. But it is, in that sense, we've all experienced powerlessness. But there are people who go through life where this is their predominant state of experience of themselves. Yeah. We all do still experience it. Even if you live at a higher stage of personal power, there are going to be moments in your life where experiences come up where you literally feel like you have no control, and no matter what you seem to do, there's no way you can gain control, and that sense of helplessness and powerless can settle in. So it's nice to know that we can also, it's nice to know we've all experienced this so we can relate to it, because that relational piece is so key when you're doing such interpersonal work with other people. If they're speaking from that place, for us to be able to say, I understand, and not I understand because I read it in a book, but I understand because I've been there and I know that. And that creates a deep sense of relational connection with people, which is so vital in this work. And be able to, again, normalize people's experiences as part of the human dynamic. So to move from powerlessness to power by association is actually a fairly significant increase in personal power. It's almost a stage of transformation in a way. To recognize that you have creative capacity to bring forth the things in your life that are meaningful for you That's a big stage in personal power to know that I can, let's say, manifest something I want, or that I've got creative capacity that can bring about circumstances or situations or experiences that I desire. But power by association, in essence, means that I draw my sense of self, my sense of personal power, my sense of worth, by my association with people or things or organizations that I have deemed to have more power than me. Okay? So it's power by association with things that I have deemed to have more power than me. And it's my association with those things that gives me a sense of personal power. Now, some of those things are quite healthy and normal and developmental. For example, you see teenagers, it is quite normal and healthy and developmental for them to be hanging out in groups in which the group gives them a sense of belonging, where they may wear similar clothes, they may listen to similar music, act a certain way. It's that association of the group that gives them a sense of worth and value and purpose and place in this world. And if you look at it in the context of growing up, that's a perfectly healthy developmental phase. We can look at it in some contexts where we say, well, maybe it's a little bit less healthy in the context, for example, like groupies in a band or gang member association with a gang, right? Where there are perhaps behaviors going on in there that may not be the healthiest for our well-being in some ways, but there's a power by association because I'm known with that, or perhaps because you work for a certain company, and when you pull out your business card and it says, I work for XYZ company, and you feel a sense of personal power and worth, like you feel that kind of glow of the association with that organization, that's power by association. And again, I don't want to come at this from the place of judging any of it. Okay. There's no point in saying, oh, that's lower and I shouldn't, or the people who do that or this. That's not the perspective. The perspective is to understand the dynamics of our human experience so that we can see ourselves within it. And then we can see others within it, which allows us to position ourselves, particularly as coaches. We say, now I can better position myself to meet the needs of a person who may be at home in that stage. Yeah. So here's another healthy example of power by association is mentorship. So mentorship basically is, say, in an organizational context, is when you have been paired up with somebody who's achieved a certain degree of success or power or status in that organization. And again, by your association with them, there's a certain glow that's cast upon you and you feel better for yourself, or you feel more purposeful or valued because of that association. Okay, that's power by association. So moving into stage 3, which is power by achievement. This is a really interesting stage. So now we're moving even further in the power dynamic, but we gain our sense of purpose, self, worth, value in this world by that which we have achieved, that which we have attained, that which we have created. And that could be things, right? So if you have, example, you have a nice car, and every time you get into that car, you think, are people seeing me get into that nice car? People see me in that car. People see me there. In that moment, right? It's like, I've achieved this car, I've earned it, I've worked for it, and the glow of the car casts a wonderful glow upon us, and we gain a sense of worth. A nice house, a Gucci bag, clothes, shoes, a nice mountain bike, whatever it is that you have attained for yourself. It could be a position at your work. It could be an amount of wealth that you've gathered. It doesn't really matter. All of that kind of external trappings of the world that we've attained through our work and through our creative efforts, sometimes, and sometimes just because we landed in it, but we're gaining a sense of personal worth and value from it. That's power by achievement. Now, here's where I think things get really interesting in power by achievement, because when we look at moving to stage 4, I'm going to talk about the crisis of integrity, which is that line between stage 3 and stage 4 in a minute. So stage 3 is a really interesting stage because this is the stage that, for the most part, our cultures socialize us towards. So we're taught from a young age what success looks like. Every culture across the world, for the most part, has its image of success in the world and behaviors that get you there, and then the things that you can show the world to show them that you've made it. Often it's wealth, material possessions, positions, influence, status, those kinds of things. We are socialized and say, hey, man, you get there and you've made it. You get those things, that money, you have made it. So we're socialized from a very young age. And you see it if you look at media today, you look at television shows today, it's all around us, this socialization towards a certain kind of power. And it really is a power that's external to us, right? It's an external form of power, but we're socialized towards it. And so therefore, and this is the case with many people, that they reach the top, they sort of, I've succeeded, I've made it, but life just becomes an ongoing journey to continually reinforce that having made it. Once they've accomplished one thing, they simply then seek another thing to accomplish, and then seek another thing to accomplish, because life has been for them a series of endless accomplishments. Now, I don't want to diminish accomplishment because, again, this is vital to our human development. I notice even, when I'm a father of a couple of kids, they're teens now, but when they were young, like even as young as 4 or 5, if you put them on a soccer field with a ball with other kids, they wanted to win. They wanted to win. And when the team won at 5 years old, and no one's telling them that winning is the end all be all at that age, at least I didn't see that happening, but there's a natural inclination to want to win. And when they won, they celebrated. It's like, great, yeah, we won. The parents, everybody's celebrating along with them. So achievement is a vital, vital part of our journey as a human being to understand our creative potential and power in this world. It's a wonderful way to build self-esteem. If you have never achieved anything of your own volition in this world, you will generally be a person who lacks a certain degree of self-esteem. So self-esteem is a developmental thing that we grow into, often due to the environment that we grow up in, but also because of the things that we have experienced that give us a sense that we can not only survive in this world, but even thrive in this world. So we cannot bypass these things. Like each of these stages, and Janet says this in her book, they're developmental stages. They're not meant to be skipped, and they're definitely not meant to be looked down upon. They're meant to be understood as a natural, normal part of our development. So again, as coaches, we can position ourselves to really meet people there in that space where they're at, because that is ultimately the golden rule of coaching, to meet people where they're at. So we want to understand it from that perspective, but we have to also understand that the challenge with that stage is that, and this is what Janet says so vividly in the book, she says, people in stage 3 are stuck, but they don't know they're stuck. That's a very interesting thought. In other words, when you've been socialized to stage 3, you don't necessarily know that there is a power dynamic beyond. In other words, you may be completely and utterly blind to the reality of power in 4, 5, and 6 stages. And I find that quite extraordinary because when I sit with that, it's like, okay, that explains a lot. That explains a lot of what I see in people who are just hell-bent on achieving and achieving and gaining and attaining and gaining, because it's just, there's no sense of what lies beyond. And for those of us who have moved beyond that stage, it can be a little bit like, how can you not, there's like a whole world of personal power that lies beyond. How can you not? But visualize it. There's no concept of it. There's no concept of it. So you're just in stage 3, learning to thrive and survive and make it in that stage. You're stuck, but you don't know you're stuck. Okay, so this is where I think things get interesting. There is between those two stages the crisis of integrity. Okay, I like to call the crisis of integrity the moment of awakening. That's my own term for it. She doesn't use that term. I use that term. It's the moment of awakening. It is that moment in a person's life when there is a dawning recognition that there is more to who they are and more to life and to reality than perhaps they have ever known before. That there is more to who they are than they have been taught. It's like a little light bulb goes off. Now, I noticed that there are a few ways that people move through the crisis of integrity, or I should say experience it. Three ways. One way is through a kind of like quite literally a moment of waking up and saying to themselves, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like that. I have known people who literally woke up one morning, put their feet on the ground, and looked at all that they had been chasing for a lifetime and asked themselves that very question. Like, what am I doing? And there's no explanation for where that dawning realization came from. So it's just like a moment of awakening. It's almost like the soul began to speak in such a volume that the mind was aware of something. In any case, that's one way. It can be kind of a momentary, over the night, overnight kind of experience. The second that I've noticed is through a real crisis in a person's life, like the death of someone close, the loss of a job that they valued greatly, a job that in particular gave them an incredible sense of self-identity, self-esteem, and self-worth, really stage three stuff. And suddenly it was lost. And in that moment of them losing that thing that they had attained that gave them self-identity, they were adrift. They felt lost in the world. There's no longer a real sense of who I am. But in those deep, dark moments, this is when the breakthrough, that moment of awakening, can really begin to shine. People will, oh, oh, oh. And it opens the door, that crisis opens the door to the transformational journey. I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. Not all say yes to it. So that's the second way, kind of a really deep, painful personal crisis of integrity. And then the third way is through just a normal, natural, evolutionary growth. In other words, these are developmental cycles that are part of our human experience. And if we are really open in a sense, and it depends, I think, so much about how we've been conditioned and raised and what we've been taught to value as the end all be all of life. I think there's a big component in that. But for those people who perhaps have been raised in environments in which there has been a far more perhaps exploratory, experimental, very open approach to living and just letting life kind of infuse and inform, there can be just a natural moment at which a person just moves into the next stage, into stage four, which is power by reflection. Like personally, that's the one that I experienced. I didn't have a moment of awakening that would happen overnight, and I didn't ever have a deep personal crisis that triggered something in me. For me, since as far back as I can remember, even 18 or 19, I was already kind of on a quest to understand the greater nature of life and spirit and how it moves in us and through us and how life is itself organized, as part of our human experience. So that was kind of my own journey. So it can be a lot less abrupt and a lot less jarring when it is that third way compared to the first two ways that I mentioned. But nonetheless, let's say people are now moving into stage four, power by reflection. And there's a really good reason it's called power by reflection. And that is because the moment that people really begin this journey, so then arise some really big questions about life. Who am I? The biggest question. Is this all there is to life? That which I've been taught. What is my purpose in this world? What is my place? What is the meaning of life? Like these are huge questions. And there are, for these questions, no easy answers. They don't just land. And that's why we call this power by reflection, because what happens is that these questions call people into themselves. They invite people to go deeper into themselves and begin to explore life. This is so often when people start exploring various earthly religions, go on seeking quests to far-flung locales, sit at the feet of masters, begin to read the great books, study the great philosophies, because there is this incredible yearning and desire to understand life in all of its color, in all of its form. And there's this intake of so much information that begins. Through all of this, new communities will form. New associations will form. Very often, the old associations of the past are kind of let go because they no longer feed that more awakening, perhaps even soulful part of themselves. And so they go on this great journey to begin to know who they are, to know more about themselves and their purpose and place in this world. And they start to go within. And so a real hallmark of this stage is the need for greater and greater time alone, solitary time, time in reflection, and time to just sit with and contemplate the great questions and mysteries of life. It's a really transformative stage for people. My experience has been that it's not a quick stage. That people who are active in this stage are anywhere between 20 to 10 to 20 years. Mm. Now, I'm not saying you cannot accelerate this, but just from kind of my experience with it and working with people over the decades who are in this, this is an involved, and there's actually a lot of sub stages to this, and maybe I'll have a chance later to talk about this, but there are sub stages to stage four that affect how we work with people as coaches as well in those sub stages. Yeah. So I'll leave that for now. That's Power by Reflection, and it's a journey into the self. It's a journey into understanding the nature of oneself. But here's where we've moved from an external source in the first three stages, an external source of personal power, to now discovering that the source of my personal power is actually in me. So now we're drawing personal power from the well of our own deeper self and our own essential nature. This is becoming prevalent in the mind. It's becoming known. So then there comes an interesting phase very much at the end of stage four called what she calls the wall. And she calls the wall the last bastion of the ego. Now, the ego, just to be clear, I call it our sense of separate self. That's it. It's my sense that I am separate from you and you and you and you and you. I have different thoughts, preferences, ideas, opinions, likes, dislikes. You're over there, I'm over here. It individuates me in this world. In other words, the ego's job is to make sure that I do not see or sense as much as possible, if ever, the interconnected nature and unified nature of life. The ego wants me to know that I am not connected to you, that you are different than me, and perhaps to be feared. Certainly, if we look at the opposite of that, which is to begin the sense that, and this is what happens through stage four, we start to create a relational field with other human beings. We start to notice we are at a core the same. We start to sense the unified field of which we are a part. We start to sense our relationship with the infinite, with the all that is. There's a dawning recognition of our spiritual nature and the interconnected tapestry of life in that field. And this comes, so this is what ego does. It just wants to keep us in fear, and it wants to keep us sensing separation, and it wants to keep us beholden to it as the driver of our life experience. But when you get to the wall, it's basically saying this is the final opportunity for you to let go of your ego. Not 100%, not in the sense that you no longer sense a boundary between yourself and other people. You're still going to have an individuated life experience, but you let go of the ego as the driver of your life experience. And that's huge. The wall, for many people, and they'll sit there for a long time, it can be just like a bit of almost like a veil. You see the other world, but it's so, people can sit there in great angst facing the wall. The ego's grip is tenacious and it does not want to let you go easily. But for those who are able to move into stage five, this is monumental. And there is a distinct sense, at least this has been my experience, a distinct sense that you have landed in something. Those great variations and sways of stage four, who am I and what's my purpose? There's a sense of I've landed in something. And the idea of purpose here, power by purpose, is that there is a distinct sense that I am to be of something in this world that is of my deepest nature, that is my lived purpose. And it can be something very simple as I'm here to heal, I'm here to love, I'm here to care for, I'm here to nurture, I'm here to uplift, I'm here to empower. I am here to make the world recognize its magnificence, whatever that may be. So there's a real sense of wanting to be of service to humanity and service to others in stage five. Now, this already begins to appear in stage four, and it can even appear in other stages like stage three, but by stage five, there's a simplicity to it. And it's no longer done in any service of the ego. Like, oh, look at this wonderful charity that I founded that serves millions of people around the world and raises millions and millions of dollars. Look at me for having done that, says the ego in stage three. By stage five, it becomes a much quieter form of service. The ego has been dampened, and we are just simply there in service of other human beings and in service of humanity. And we begin to create. We begin to create from that space. It's a very, very highly creative space as you begin to flourish into your purpose in this world. The line between 5 and 6, between power by purpose and power by wisdom, is a very fine line. It can often feel that these two just kind of interrelate with each other. I think the classic, the most vivid definition of power by wisdom that I can come up with is when you think of someone like Yoda in Star Wars, you know, like just this really like wise one who doesn't really need to be about much. And in fact, by stage 6, people have very often dropped a lot of the need to even create, and yet they're creative. They become very at home in paradoxes. And by a paradox, I mean this notion of that something is true and not true on the same level. For example, the paradox that what I do with my life is absolutely important, and what I do with my life is not important in any way. Like that's a paradox. And stage 6s are really good at living within paradoxes. Like and so that's the best way that I can really conceive of it because it's such a high level of just being. It's just really about a way of being in this world. It's deeply being oriented. Just presence, the presence of one's essential nature that it just vibrates. And yes, they create, yes, they associate, yes, they do grand things, but they're uplifting the world through the quality of being and presence beyond anything external that they really lay their hands on. I guess that's the best way that I can describe power by wisdom. And there are likely more stages. Janet even says that there's probably a 7th stage and maybe even beyond. She doesn't go into that in her book, and we can all speculate because at some point we're going to die, and that's going to be the greatest transformation that we've ever experienced, very likely. And that may usher in a whole new understanding of future potentials of our nature. Who knows? But for now, I'll just pause then for a minute because that was quite a bit. And I'll just some clarification questions, and then I'll go into another piece around how this applies to the coaching context and how we really support people who are at different stages. So yeah, if you have a question, just put up your hand. There's a little emoji, sorry, that you can just raise your hand, and then I can field your question, like Christy just did. Hi, Christy, come in.
Thank you so much. Is it possible that people can be in stages simultaneously in different parts of their life?
Perfect. Yes, thank you for bringing up that question. That's actually a really important question that I did not speak to. So what Janet says, and I do, again, just from my experience, concur with this, is that anyone can experience any stage at any time. In other words, even if you're in stage 1, you may one day just have a glimpse of stage 6. It likely will not sustain itself. But it is possible that for just a moment, you can sit in a kind of expanded state of self and see something about the nature of life that really is exalted by where you're normally sitting. So anybody can experience any stage at any given time. She does say, though, that we have a kind of home stage that we, in any given moment, can most identify with. And as that becomes our home stage, most of our life experiences in that time will be experienced through that home stage. Yeah. But we can, again, bounce around, different contexts, different experiences. Our home life, we may be in stage 4, but our work life, we may be firmly rooted in stage 3. Yeah. So it's not clear cut necessarily, but absolutely we can coexist in multiple stages simultaneously.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that raises the question then for everybody to contemplate sort of where do you see yourself within this model as a kind of home stage, right? Now, I have noticed that people tend to kind of overestimate where they are a little bit, but that's human nature. That's a psychological trait that we tend to put ourselves beyond where we actually are. But that's okay. Even the contemplation of the idea can be helpful, but sometimes it takes a bit of exploration to really kind of get clear on that. Yeah, any other questions? Just come in. Just unmute. Come on in.
Leon, can you share, I'm sure there's a lot of coaches here, aspiring coaches. How do we use this model to meet our clients where they are and better support?
Yeah, That's the second part I was going to go into in just a minute.
Oh,
I just wanted to make sure that just in terms of what I was speaking to in the model, there are no just lingering questions. And then I'll go, yeah, I'll do exactly that, like how we can then see our clients within this. Okay, so far so good, folks. I don't see any hands raising. So far so good. Okay, great. So with
Lou, sorry,
so with that
Lou,
under
come in.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Oh Lou, yeah, great. Come in.
thank you. So I have a question, might be silly, but so let's say you're going through like these different stages and you had your crisis of integrity, you're into the power by reflection, being held by the wall, and could it be a possibility that that wall pushes you back and then you go back into, I don't know, three, or because you move into this new stage in your life and you, so it's like a cycle, more of a moving forward up the stages.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I like to that's really good because very often moving into stage 5 is inhibited by that which we have not yet fully attended to of the early stages. Think of the earlier stages as a little bit of a gravitational pull, particularly stage 1, 2, and 3. So, there's going to be lingering pieces of those. And I'll give you a simple example. Like for example, finances is a really challenging one for people, in generally speaking, financial security. And we've been taught that there's certain ways that we go about getting financial security in this world. And some of those are very transactional, such as that, you've got to work really hard. And when you work really hard, you'll be rewarded. Okay, so there's a thought that was likely implanted at some point in our early conditioning. We've kind of held on to that. And that idea of working really, really hard to get what we want has worked for us. It's become a wonderful success strategy. It's taken us right into stage 3, and we have all of the things in our life that have really worked for us because of that. We have a nice house, a nice car. We have good trips every year. We have all these wonderful things because I worked hard. Now, stage 5 is calling you into a whole new paradigm of living. It's inviting you to understand a way of working that is far more relational, far more integrated, far more holistic, in which life begins to unfold for you. Which can bump up right against this idea that I need to really work hard to make things happen. So that becomes its own kind of gravitational pull because the thought for people is, what will happen to me if I let that go? Will I be safe? What will I lose? What if I lose everything I've gained? So those fear thoughts, which are, again, here's a little ego at play, those fear thoughts keep us locked into old paradigms of operation, old paradigms of thought, and that then prohibits us from moving into these higher realms, which are truly inviting you into whole new ways of understanding the nature of yourself and your relationship with life, which means you're learning how creation works differently than in those early stages. It's less linear, right? Less about making it, less about one's personal will to make something happen, and much more about a beginning understanding of how do I partner with life in service of life. And that learning is challenging for people. So that's why I brought up finances, because that tends to be one of the ones where people kind of straddle worlds. And what I mean by that is they keep one foot firmly in stage 3 and one foot firmly in stage 4, not fully willing to leave that world because of the fear of what they will lose if they do. Yeah,
Yes, and then the only way in which number 4 or 5 would be sustainable is unless you change those thoughts, those patterns, those beliefs into
right.
new beliefs, and then once you get those new beliefs, then it'll be more sustainable to stay into 5 and 4 once you get
Exactly.
of the fear.
Yeah, exactly. And
You
just to give
became a
you
new person, like a new.
in a sense, it is truly like you will look back at your old self and kind of go, wow. Because it's not just a different feeling about yourself, it's a different way of understanding the very nature of reality and how it functions in these higher paradigms of understanding. And it truly operates differently. But stage 4 is the stage in which we have to lean in to figure all that out. And that's the real challenge for people is that there's, like I said, there's no necessarily easy recipe that says you just do these things and you can just jump into stage 5. It's highly experiential, and it's a field of trial and error until one day, without you knowing when that day will be and how it will arise, one day you'll suddenly sense, I may have landed. But I get so many people who I work with in stage 4, like, when is this going to happen? The angst of not being is killing them in a sense, right? And that is itself problematic. Like the desire and yearning to be there becomes so heavy that that becomes its own weight. Just another example. So straddling those two worlds, though, that's a big one for people. They're unwilling to really commit to stage 4. They'll dabble in it. They'll go to a nice workshop. They'll read a book. They'll do a bit of work. They'll have a coach, but they're not really leaning in. Yeah. I'm again not judging. This is how some people live. And I say this from a coaching perspective because, come back to Jonathan's point, we have to be able to coach people at different stages. Cindy has a question though. So yeah, I'll take your question, then I'll dive into the second part.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, are you going to cover how this may affect all your relationships as you move through? Like if you are moving into, like, let's say stage 4 or 5 and all the people around you are in stage 2 or something,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
how
No, I
that
wasn't
might affect
planning to
all your
talk about that.
relationships.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to talk about that, Cindy, but I can tell you that's a thing. That's a real thing. Because stage 4 is it's like an inner earthquake goes off. And one of the real implications of that is a movement away from the old world, which includes friends, family, and all of that which they may still inhabit as a way of living, but is kind of contrary to where it seems you're going. And there can be a real sense that, and sometimes fear in people of, I'm walking away from people that I've known in my whole life, and I feel guilty. I feel a bit ashamed for doing that, but I just don't want to. That's one. Or the other is, in married couples, I see this quite a bit. I used to make a bad joke that in every deep coaching intensive, there was one divorce. And it was not a joke meant totally jokingly, and like there was a truth to it. And the reality is that when we do this work, this deep inner work, we get clear. We get really, really clear. And sometimes that clarity leads us closer to certain people. But sometimes that clarity is just, this isn't working. And I have to do the hard, hard, hard thing of leaving someone or something that I have deeply loved and deeply valued, so that I can be true to my own journey and my own path. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up, because, again, what I talked about earlier was that there's these dynamics to each stage. And the more we become familiar with the dynamics of a stage, the better we are able to support someone in those dynamics. But here's the rub, folks. You can't really support anyone further than you have gone yourself. That's the reality, because otherwise you're just doing it from book smarts. And that's not going to work. And this is why in the center, we say that the thing we're working with is that your transformation enables transformation. In other words, you don't need to be fully transformed, because I don't even know what that necessarily means, but you don't need to be fully that to be of service to other human beings. The desire to be of service is enough. But just know that you're not really going to attract people into your sphere who are at your level or beyond. You're going to attract people who are not yet where you are, who generally are saying something like, I see something in you that I aspire to in myself, and I'd like to spend more time with you in some context, mentoring context, coaching context, friendship context. There's something in you. So know that you don't need to be concerned that you can't help people beyond where you are, because you can know that you'll always attract people who aspire to something in you that they see. And there's going to be always plenty of people who are going to be aspiring to something that you hold within yourself that they have not yet recognized or revealed in themselves. Yeah. So this is a good segue then to talk just about how these dynamics show up. And I don't want to say that everything I say here is absolute truth, because I want to speak in generalities, and that means there's always exceptions to rules. So we'll just put that there. There's going to be exceptions to what I see, because what I'm naming are patterns. And we can always find outliers. Okay, so with that in mind, looking at, let's say, stage one, for the most part, people who are truly in stage one are not suitable for coaching. Isn't that but now we can coach anybody? Not necessarily. Because what coaching asks is that you have within yourself a desire for betterment, the desire to grow, the desire to even achieve, to create, to be a better person, whatever it may be. You've got some kind of an impulse in you towards a greater you. That's kind of the minimum requirement for a good coaching relationship to work effectively. If you're trying to work with someone who literally blames the entire world for what they are experiencing, who does not take ownership of the fact that it is all in them, then you're not really going to be able to coach that person. Just as a kind of basic condition of coaching, they would be better suited to other forms of self-help, such as perhaps therapy, okay? Where people who are highly skilled at working with people who have, let's say, lost all hope, or who live from a true victimhood or powerless place, can begin to find some footing. But coaching generally doesn't teach you those skills. So I'm not saying you can't work with people who have those experiences of powerlessness. I'm just saying if someone's home is powerlessness, there's not going to be a lot that you as a coach are going to be able to do for them, even in your most advanced state, until they make one big step. And that is the step to say, I have enough creative capacity to change. It's not all out there. It's in me. And that really is the ushering in of people in stage 2 and beyond. Like that's really where it begins. So stage 2 is a really interesting stage. And from a coaching perspective, what I've noticed works well for people in stage 2 is less of a pure coaching relationship and a mix of coaching and mentoring, particularly if you or yourself have moved beyond stage 2. Because the stage tours are, it's not that you want to feed their power of association, but they look up to people and they look to others for signals on how to behave. And if you're able to hold out a healthy, balanced, worldly way of being in the world, or acting or doing, and you want to share that with them, stage tours can gain invaluably from that experience with you. So I've noticed that when I'm working with stage tours, that if I just do a pure coaching approach, which is not really to be sharing of my own life and experiences, it is definitely not to be advising or guiding, right? That's basically the coaching rule. Like, it's a no advice zone. If we're doing that, then I find stage tours can start to get a little bit anxious when they reach the I don't know. Like, I just don't know. I just don't know. I don't, like, could you just tell me what I need to do? Like, it would be really great if you could just tell me what to do. And if you leave them in that space of saying, nope, I'm the coach, I'm not ever going to tell you what to do, you're going to leave them hanging in a way that is not necessarily for their well-being and betterment. And that's our work. That doesn't mean that you're constantly advising. I'm never really big on advice. My form is always share of a life experience and hold it out and say, this is what I did, this is what I chose, this is what I believe or experience, and this is how it worked for me. What are you taking away from my sharing in that way? How is there something in what I've said that is valuable for you that you can say and apply to your life in some way? Like, turn it back over to them as a mentoring form. It's not you should do this and you should do that. And because the coach's role is to facilitate people connecting with their own inner resourcefulness. And if you're just laying on shoulds, then they are starting to listen to you more than themselves. And the ultimate gift as a coach that I think you can give another person is the ability to listen deeply to their own inner wisdom and guidance and knowing. So your mentoring would just be to facilitate that process in them. Okay. But that balancing it can really be helpful for stage tours. Stage 3, this is very much where transactional coaching comes into it, and to some degree, developmental coaching. Now, I call transactional coaching kind of a very results-driven, objective-oriented coaching. Like, I'm at A, and I want to get to B, and I want to get there as expediently as possible. Like, give me the steps, ask me the questions that are going to peel away what needs to be peeled away or understood so that I can get from A to B. I want to communicate better. I want to have a better career trajectory. I want to get that promotion. I want to get healthy. I want to lose weight. So often the goals are kind of external things because that's what stage 3 is really about, the attainment of certain things. And so people want to learn about themselves and grow so as to attain those things that are external to themselves. So if you work in organizations and you do, let's say, leadership development training, a lot of it is contextualized as in if you want to grow in the organization, you learn about yourself in these ways. The feedback is oriented to the things that you need to change so that you can move forward in the organization. So there's a linearity to that kind of coaching. There's a very much, it's very heady at times. It's very intellectual. It's often question driven, as in here's the powerful question, that kind of thing. Developmental coaching moves a little bit more into the sphere of exploring deeper beliefs and value sets. And in developmental coaching, people really love to learn about themselves. So if you have a diagnostic, here's Strengths Finder, you can learn about your strengths. Here's the Myers-Briggs, you can learn about your personality. Here's the Enneagram, you can learn about yourself in this way. So people are learning about themselves through external structures and constructs. And there can be real value in this. In fact, what I'm doing today by sharing with you an external construct is a kind of form of developmental work, in that you're learning about yourself through some kind of means. But it's still not the same as knowing yourself at an essential level, because to get there, you're going to have to drop all of that even. Like drop all of that. Because the essence of who you are transcends what any model can ultimately tell you about yourself. But in stage 3 work, this is often what we do. And it can be a wonderful place to work as a coach because people here really genuinely want to learn and grow. They just don't really yet understand that there is a power beyond, that it's still so very much for them about the external, about the achievement, the attainment, for something that makes them feel better about themselves. It's something that gives them a sense of purpose, value, and worth in the world. Okay, wonderful. Moving into stage 4, this is really, for me, the great transformational stage. This is where we really, really start to go deep, if people are ready for it. This is when we start to look at what's called the self-concept. And the self-concept are all the beliefs, values, attitudes, mindsets that you have been taught, conditioned in, since you were young about who you are and the way that the world is. And since people are already beginning to question the nature of life in themselves, this stuff comes up. In particular, the pain of your past experiences. What I call pain can be unattended sorrow, unattended traumas, unattended disappointments, betrayals, hurts, all of that which you perhaps have not fully healed, but have stuffed away in some corner of your mind and you carry around like a bag of bricks. Each of these layers of yourself has to be kind of illuminated and attended to. This is the nature of stage 4. It is a deeply, deeply personal, deeply transformative stage because we're finally willing to drop the masks. We're finally willing to be deeply honest with ourselves about what we really believe and what we really value and to question it. Have I really, really just been taught this, or is this something that's true to me? Really true to me. So stage 4, this is the work that we really position coaching for at the center. Because so many people are awakening to a deeper sense of themselves, but this journey is open-ended, it's unknown, it's tumultuous, it's joy-filled, it's light and shadow, it's heavy, it's awesome, it's all these things mixed into one gigantic ball. And to be able to hold a space, a container for someone to go through these very volatile dynamics of self-exploration is a massive gift. But you cannot coach it in linearity. You cannot coach it the way you coach it in stage 3. And the reason is, in stage 3, there's a linearity from here to there. Through questions and steps and sequence, I can move myself to where I want to be. Stage 4 is like a blank piece of paper where you take a crayon and you just scribble all over that piece of paper. That's stage 4. There's no linearity to it. There's a death of an old self and there's an emergence of a new self, and how we create a cocoon or a container in which we hold those dynamics, that's the real work. And so as a coach, you have to be now very, very adept at skills like holding space. And that's its own great learning journey. To drop the need to ask questions, to learn how to sit in states of great pain and great elevation and beingness, to hold these attributes of selfhood so that another person can run into the wall if they need to over and over again, who can be in the greatest pain or in the greatest joy, and you can create a container for all of that, that you can normalize their experience. So that's stage 4, and the coaching is very different. Now we move to stage 5. Interesting, it shifts again. In stage 5 coaching, or stage 5ers, you don't have to do much at all. A stage 5er will walk in, they'll sit down with you, and they'll just begin to share. And that sharing is a processing. All you need to do is really listen, acknowledge, perhaps reflect a thing or two back. And by the end of the conversation, the stage 5er will have what they needed. Why? Because they talked themselves into it. In a sense, you've just created a way for them to let go of any of the stressors of the mind so that they can connect with that resourceful space within themselves that knows. And once they connect with that, they know what they need to do and be about in this world. The coaching becomes very, very useful. It's wonderful to sit with stage 5ers. It really is. And interestingly, by stage 6, stage 6ers don't need coaches. Why? There's only one place they turn. There's only one place they turn, to the guru within. Stage 6ers are fully at ease and at home in their deepest being. And they are fully aware that it is all in themselves. I'm not saying they never have a conversation with anybody when they feel stuck once in a while. I'm not saying that. But generally speaking, you're not going to see a stage 6er seeking coaching. They will seek a conversation with a trusted friend who they know can just sit with them. And like stage 5ers, just let the revelation surface. And there we go. That's it. So your greatest coaching opportunities generally in the world, for those of you who are practicing coaches, lie in stage 2, 3, and 4. The vast majority of people who seek coaching are going to be in those stages. Even by stage 5, as I said, people are not necessarily seeking coaching anymore, though they may once in a while seek out someone for a short period who can hold a space for them to really clear out some things, kind of center within and get clear on their own path forward. Yeah. So interestingly, stage 1, not so suitable for coaching. Stage 6, not even wanting it. Coaching? Why would I do that? I have that which is within, the source of my power, the source of my being, the source of my creation, the source of all that I am. There it is. So I'll pause there. I know we've already gone, Jonathan, a few minutes over our allotted hour, but I'm happy to stay on because at this point, there may be more questions about what all this means. And I would just love to sit with those of you who would like to converse. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I'll just leave here in the chat if folks do need to drop off are just a couple of links here for you. Because one thing that we're really committed to at the center is really expanding this work out to as many people as possible. So we have a YouTube channel and a podcast. So the podcast is really interesting because you get to hear the stories of people traversing these different stages of power. It's really incredible stories that I highly recommend checking out. And then Leon has a bunch of videos on different aspects of transformational coaching on this channel. So check it out. And for those of you that are interested in learning more about our program, we have a preview call coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. I'll leave a link for that as well if you're interested in learning more about the Deep Coaching Intensive. So that is the housekeeping items. We can open up the floor now to some Q&A related. And there have been questions in the chat, Leon.
Oh, great. Can you read them to me?
Yeah, there's a juicy one that I think is important to answer. Yeah. Bryce asks, with trauma, should not this be addressed in therapy? Is it beyond the scope of coaching?
Yeah, great question, right? Because there's going to be a lot of that coming up in people in stage 4 who may be on a journey of kind of awakening to a higher nature, but have something unbelievably painful that they have not yet really worked through. And stage 4 calls people to reveal and unearth this. It needs to be attended to. You cannot move into stage 5 if you're carrying a gigantic bag of rocks. It's just not going to happen. And so the question then is, how do we best support people who perhaps have been through great trauma? And again, I've noticed it's very dependent on the person and their unique situation. And the only way to find out is to have conversations with them around these topics to get a sense of kind of the grip of that trauma and its emotional residue within the totality of their system still. And if there is great grip and great pain, and maybe even some sense of still lingering victimhood, right? That's a big indicator that the sessions that you're talking with, there's still a lot of perhaps finger pointing at the external world for this and that. That person may be better suited to a therapeutic relationship with someone who has trauma-based experience than it would be with a transformational coach. But again, I said it's very dependent on the person, because I have worked with people who have indeed done deep work on themselves already in the trauma sphere. And although there is still lingering pieces of it that come up, they can speak to it and you can still feel there's some lingering pain. But the overriding thing that makes them right for the work of a transformational coach is that you'll hear something like, I am really, truly ready to let this go. And when they say it, you'll get a sense of where they are in that. It's not just, oh, I so want to let this go. Like there's not this kind of angst around it. There's just a deep knowing that while I'm still with it at times, this pain of trauma, I'm ready to experience myself beyond this state, to know who I am and my unlimited nature beyond this. And when you're hearing or sensing something like that with a person, I can say, move forward until some flags come up that would suggest maybe not. Maybe then it's time for a therapeutic intervention of some sort. Now, there is a rise recently of trauma-based coaching and trauma-informed coaching, and it works really well with the deep coaching work that we do. The difference of deep coaching and trauma-informed coaching is that trauma-informed coaching allows coaches to know how best to work with people in trauma, even if it's a coaching context, but it's still just about the trauma. The deep transformational work that we're doing is to help usher people into stage 5 and beyond, which means as much as we're dealing with the heaviness and the gravity of their life, we are also facilitating experiences of them in the deepest being. Experiences where they can touch their higher nature and begin to know themselves in ways that perhaps they have never really known before, and to begin to embody higher states of personal consciousness and well-being and resiliency. So our work really is to usher in these other experiences as well, as much as we're holding space for attending to pain that is still lingering, and to help people really heal that. So the quality of the space that we're learning to hold can help people release from deep within their mind and even body some of these stressors that have been held to for a time. Yeah, thank you everyone, truly, for being here, taking time. As I said, these are unusual conversations. These are not things we're talking about every day. So the fact that you are understanding this, as you want to understand this, you want to learn this, that says something about you, absolutely, and what you're holding out for others as you kind of absorb and integrate this information for yourself. So go into this world, be that which you are, uplift, enliven, and trust the journey. Because man, if you see yourself on this journey in some way, let me tell you, it's awesome. I can think of nothing better to do with my time, my work, my life, than to understand what it is to live at the highest level of our human potential. So go on this journey, lean in, do not fear. It'll take you places, inside and out. So until we cross paths again, thank you very much from myself and Jonathan at the center.